You're listening to The Edge with Mark Thompson.
Hi, and welcome to the show. I'm Mark. Great to have you here. And in this episode, Michael Shure is back from the road where he accidentally meets what turns out to be the key principles in a murder that's linked to a white power neo-Nazi rally. Well, I say murder. It's a murder investigation. And ultimately, it's an attempted murder. But we'll let Michael sort of unfurl that whole thing for you. We're also going to address the bizarre controversy around a Gold Star family and a call from the President of the United States. That's the first 15, 20 minutes of the show. We call it the Fast 15 with Michael Shure. Then we get a call from India. In India, animals from elephants to tigers to bears are brutalized. What's going on in India is just awful, but this is a hopeful episode, so don't get bummed out. The guy who's going to call us is the founder of an organization called Wildlife SOS, and they have single-handedly rescued and rehabbed thousands of these creatures, and maybe more importantly, what they've done is they've eliminated a lot of the cruel practices torturing and killing so many of these innocent animals across India. In other words, they've changed the economy of all of this. So you can do one thing, you can take away poachers and you can take away those that are inflicting cruelty. But if you don't give them another way to make money, there are going to be other poachers and those inflicting cruelty behind them. So what they've done, and you'll discover in this episode, is very inventively and very strategically applied economics to the situation and have saved countless animals. We don't have elephants or tigers or a lot of these exotic creatures living in any of our neighborhoods typically. But if I told you that we're down to the last few hundred elephants or tigers or these precious exotic animals on Earth, it would bother you. It would most likely be a cause of concern. And so when I tell you that many of these species are endangered, are tortured, are put through this misery in India, you want it to stop because you're, generally speaking, probably a person of a fairly decent heart. So I'm going to introduce you today to someone who is making a difference in many, many ways and really making a difference to roll back what has been a traditional tide of cruelty in India. So with that said, I will quickly beg for money. Yes, this podcast comes to you free. Yes, we appreciate your downloads. We appreciate you recommending this podcast to others, sharing it, giving us your 5-star reviews. We have great podcasts ahead, by the way. I've got tremendous pipeline of some great episodes ahead. So glad you're here. And if this is one of your first episodes, welcome. Oh, you'll love it. It takes some time to get used to it, but then you'll really love it. I appreciate you being here. You can leave a donation through the PayPal link on our website. And of course, please do all your Amazon shopping through our website, edge-show.com. You'll see an Amazon banner. It'll say shop Amazon or whatever. Click on that. We get a little piece of whatever you spend. Thank you for being here. And now, on with the show.
This is The Edge.
edge-show.com.
Edge lubricates as it lathers.
edge-show.com.
Listen to the phone side, then listen to the edge side.
edge-show.com.
Phone, edge.
edge-show.com.
This is The Edge.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? Stop what you're doing and listen.
Time for the Fast 15, politics and more. He's back from the road. Please welcome him back. He is Michael Shure, everybody.
Oh, thank you so much. Wow. Nothing feels more like coming home than seeing your live audience.
Well, I felt it was a smattering of applause, but nonetheless, nice to have some applause.
Well, I feel appreciated, smattering or not.
Even in smattered form.
Yeah.
Cool to get you back. As I always say to you off the air, I will just say it on the air, thank you, because I know, we don't pay you for this. Nobody on this show gets paid. So people who appear have to want to be here, and I know you have a very busy schedule, so I thank you. You're just getting back off the road, and what were you covering?
I was covering Richard Spencer giving a speech at the University of Florida in Gainesville. Richard Spencer is the white nationalist who has this idea of creating a white homeland and white utopia.
How's that coming?
So far, not great, Mark. He was one of the ringleaders in Charlottesville, and he then leased out a performance space at the University of Florida in Gainesville, and they couldn't stop it from happening. It's a public place, and he has free speech rights, and the county was called into a state of emergency by Governor Rick Scott there. That's really just to get the law enforcement teams and agencies to work together. It was blanketed with police. 500 police. They spent over $500,000 to protect Richard Spencer and the city from what could happen, and nothing really ended up happening.
Probably because of that big police presence.
Probably, but then something happened. We got there. I landed in Orlando at 5 in the morning. We drove 2 hours, my camera operator and I, and we went to Gainesville, and we went to where the speech was going to happen hours later. And there weren't very many people. Some press getting set up, casing the joint. We weren't going to go into the speech. We were going to stay outside where the protests were going to be. Then I saw 3 skinheady-looking types that were there. And a couple of people were talking to them, press people with pads and pens. And I went over and I started speaking to one of them. It turns out he was there in support of Richard Spencer. He's a neo-Nazi. The other one was dressed in khakis and a white shirt and glasses. And so they were all in Charlottesville trying to look collegiate when they went there. And his name was William Fears. And I talked to him for quite a while, just one-on-one. Both of them. Tyler Tinbrink was one of them and William Fears the other. And I looked at William Fears, not so much Tyler Tinbrink, but here's a smart guy who is articulate, crazy. You hate the hate that was coming out of his mouth.
Yeah, he's articulating the wrong things.
He is, but I felt sad for him for some reason. I felt like, God, there's this being here. Something went wrong somewhere in the Fears home when he was a kid, and this is what the result is. And anyway, I had a talk with him, and the speech went on. Later on, there was one neo-Nazi who came out of the speech or was just there who was heckled, and there were, I would say, between 1,000 and 2,000, I'm terrible at guessing numbers, people there, counter-protesters, and it was amazing. They were singing, they were chanting, no Nazis. There were Republicans there, there were Democrats, there were hippies, there were Krishnas, everybody was there. And so one of them came out, he was punched in the face, but that guy, not the puncher, but the punchee, the Nazi guy, was arrested, I'm guessing because of a warrant. I'm sure he was on probation of some kind. And then William Fears, that kid, came out, and they chased him back into the building because I guess he hadn't realized that there would be so many counter-protesters there. I don't know whether they were protesters or I guess they were protesters. Came out, and then later he came out surrounded by, and you can only say this a few times in your professional life, a phalanx of police officers, walked out, and hundreds of people around them marching out with him. And I just said, hey, William. And I got his attention. I said, how was it worth it? And he just kind of shrugged at me. It turned out later, at 5:30 p.m., somewhere else in Gainesville where I wasn't, I was doing my work elsewhere, Tinbrink and Fears' brother came upon some protesters, were egging them on. The protesters threw a rock or broke their back window. Tinbrink said, if you come any closer to me, I'm going to shoot. They came closer. He shot. He missed. The 3 of them fled out of town, were arrested about 20 minutes away from Gainesville. And the people there are 3 people in jail now for attempted murder, 2 of whom I just had a conversation with that morning, and all over nothing, all over hating.
It serves no higher purpose.
It serves no higher purpose, and they probably look at themselves as martyrs in some kind of a way. It's just a waste of life. I mean, I don't have sympathy. I mean, they're doing this, but you look at it from a human point of view, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that people waste so much time hating.
It's one thing to be impassioned about something. They certainly have their
Right.
their impassioned view, but it's an impassioned emotion all directed toward hate.
Right. And it's not drug-induced necessarily. It's not because they've had tremendous contact with a person of color or a Jewish person.
No,
who
in
has
fact,
offended
if they've had actually
Exactly.
had contact with any of these groups that they hate on, they probably wouldn't hate them as much.
Exactly.
Or they do this thing, which happens, which is that that guy,
he's
guy
the good
X,
kind.
he's the good Jew,
Yeah,
or he's the
right.
good black guy. But,
Right.
yeah, the rest of them,
No, that's exactly that would happen. But
my
it's also
Jew, my black is good.
Right. It's very surreal to have been speaking to 2 people, even though it was a strange conversation. They were both strange conversations. To be speaking with 2 people who later in the day are booked for murder and may never get out.
Oh, no, I don't. In fact, that is what makes this story so remarkable. As you were going through the names, I thought, well, why is Michael telling us the names? I mean, it's not like, we're going to look these people up on Facebook later. Oh, wait, their names are important because later in this story, they literally are the people who are involved in
Right.
the most violent confrontation of the day.
Yeah, $1 million bail, and they're going to go to jail for a long time. They had felony possession charges too, gun possession.
This hate stuff has been energized, though, Why?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Social media has probably energized. I mean, it's my fall guy. You know, I always blame it on social media, but it's true. It has its merits, and we, you know, I think we celebrate those merits, but we also have to realize that this happens to help people who want to do nefarious and hateful things, and I think that's what's happened. I think that
if I wanted to, not to just to interrupt for a second, because obviously you're right, social media makes it easier to organize these things. But if I wanted to get a chili cook-off going, I would put it up on social media, and I may or may not get enough people for the chili cook-off, because there are a lot of chili cook-offs.
Right, but people wouldn't react to a chili cook-off. I mean, if you had the news at 6 o'clock every evening or 6:30 every evening at one time, you had the morning paper and the afternoon paper at one time, there were fixed times when you would get something to react to, and you wouldn't have a direct way of engaging the opposition if you were opposed to it. If in 1964 Barry Goldwater said something in the Senate that offended you, you'd write a letter, right? And he'd get 18 letters, or he'd get 214 letters, whatever it was. But it wouldn't have happened that afternoon. He wouldn't have responded. The people who were writing the letter to Barry Goldwater were not getting their own letters to them about the letter they wrote. It just has this effect. And the other part of it is the media, and it brings up a huge debate, I think, in my mind. I wondered about my purpose there. Am I helping by telling the story or hurting? Now, at the end of the day, not just because I was there and I flew across the country and I was paid to be there, I feel like it's the right thing to do. It has to be reported. If this happens in the dark, it spreads in the dark, and then it can be too late.
That last point is the place where you get into a tug-of-war as to what's appropriate. Are you giving these people attention that only serves to fuel them more, or are you giving these people attention so that we can all see how horrifying this subculture of society is, and is continuing to be as it grows?
Right. If they didn't, though, in the civil rights movement, shine a flash bulb on the horrific things that were happening in the Jim Crow South, change would not have happened as quickly. If Selma happened without coverage, we wouldn't know about Selma today, right? And who knows when those laws would have changed. So I think, as hideous as it is to see hundreds of journalists there covering hate, I still think at the end of the day it's the right thing to do.
So much is going on in Washington, and Washington is a catch-all for in terms of public policy, in terms of the latest go-rounds with the president. I have my own issues, and they're not related to the Gold Star families, but it's hard to even get any attention on my issues, which are related to the EPA and the gutting of government policy and the flimsy regulations on air and water, and it's just horrifying what's happening there, and maybe we can come back to it in this limited time. I doubt we'll have time, but in a future episode. I am astounded that this Gold Star family thing, when you've lost a loved one in battle, you assume this place is a Gold Star family. I mean, no one wants it. You are cherished and viewed in a way, having made this sacrifice, as no other American is cherished and viewed.
Right. Somehow,
this Gold Star family ended up in this bizarre back and forth with the President of the United States.
Right, and he's not the first Gold Star family. Remember Kaiser Khan and his son in the election. It's an unbelievable thing that this is where we are, that you have a president waking up talking about Hillary Clinton and Facebook on Twitter the day that a slain soldier is being laid to rest, and the president's not talking about that. And that comes after days of back and forth between a congresswoman and a president and his chief of staff, who it turns out had to lie.
I want to stop you there. How did the chief of staff lie?
By misrepresenting something.
You're talking about the congresswoman's remarks.
Frederica.
Just can you summarize those for us? Donald Trump, as president, called this mother of this fallen soldier, and then what happened?
Correct. Basically, there was a conversation that happened, and Frederica Wilson was on that call, and they bore witness to what was happening between the president. She said the president said he knew what he was getting into, basically. I don't know if that's the exact quote, but I think it was, which seemed callous. The congresswoman was in the car listening as this conversation was happening. It brought about a debate over whether or not the president calls people which went to did Obama call people, which went to did Obama call John Kelly, the chief of staff of the White House now, after his son was lost at war. Kelly talked about and I didn't hear the press conference that happened while I was in Gainesville, but he talked about the conversation and about an experience he had and overheard about Wilson and at a time of Obama when Obama was in office, and he misrepresented that.
Wilson was dedicating an FBI building
That's
or
right,
celebrating
that's right, and gave a speech.
Yeah, and
he mischaracterized that speech.
Right, suggesting that she was sort of doing a victory lap about all the work that she had done to
That's
get
right. That's right, Mark. Yeah.
to get the building funding and get it all done.
When the actual text of the speech came out, it was wrong.
The truth was she was actually acknowledging members of the GOP for their help in getting it done. She was
That's
celebrating a bipartisan effort to get this FBI building done. So it flew in the face, contradicted completely the account that Kelly was giving.
Entirely. And Kelly was put out there to do that and say that. And now you have somebody who was brought in to get this White House back in order, who is doing exactly what this White House is doing. Not a far cry from what Sean Spicer was doing. I have a hard time with it, but I don't know that I still think that John Kelly was probably given some of that information and given, bad information, but I'm not as intimately involved in that story. I couldn't even recount it verbatim what happened, but I do know that that's often the case with these spokespeople.
But that's essentially the most recent controversy. Now I want to go back for a second and say something in Donald Trump's, I hesitate to use the word favor, but say something about Donald Trump in that moment. I think Donald Trump just doesn't speak very well, doesn't articulate generally very well.
Yeah.
He's used to grandstanding. He's not used to consoling people. And when he called that Gold Star mother, he said, he might have said something along the lines of, well, even though they all sign up for this and are aware of it. I agree
with you. I agree with
you. So it's still a horrible loss. When you play that back a lot, it sounds like, he signed up for it and,
Right. You could say it's amazing that he signed up for this knowing what could have happened. But, I don't think this is the worst thing that the president has done.
Sure.
And I think that everything he does is under a microscope, as is everything that every president does. I don't even know that he had bad intentions when he made this call.
I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think he was being flip. I think it was a bad choice of words, but I don't think that was his intent. I'm willing to move past and get on to all of the other things that this president has done that
exactly
aren't right.
Exactly right.
So, if it were my kid, I would be pissed at the president, but I think that his intent was not as it came out.
But let me just make one other point and see whether you agree with me. There is a deification of the military and the generals in the White House and generals in general, that I find mortifying, because it's the very idea that can lead to horrible authoritarianism. And even if it's not outright authoritarianism, it's de facto moments of authoritarianism. By that I mean, don't question the general.
Well, you heard Sarah Sanders say, how un-American, how unpatriotic. I think it was, was it Chip Reed asking a question, and so this is a 4-star general, Well, yeah, he's a 4-star human being. He's not a general first, and we are questioning what he's saying. So you're absolutely right. That's not probably going to change. We elevate a lot of military people, in whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, into positions of importance in the government. But this deification happens on one side. And you have a president who said he likes his, about John McCain, he likes his soldiers not captured, right? And then people were lampooning that he likes his soldiers not killed about this kid, David Johnson. It's somebody who talks a big talk about respecting the military. You'll recall he didn't even go to a debate in Iowa in the middle of the campaign to have a fundraiser for veterans. After the fundraiser, they realized none of the money was going to the veterans. The money didn't go. He didn't write the check that he said he was going to write. So he's been so two-faced about it. But the problem of deifying these generals, I don't know that it'll go away, but I think it's refreshing that when Sarah Sanders, the White House press secretary, said that, there was a huge backlash. And I think that's important. And it's coming not just from Democrats who don't like this. It's coming from Republicans. There's a problem between civilians and the civilian authority.
I hope that the backlash is something that is really out there. I think that the messaging that we see or that we might be experiencing in the echo chamber of Twitter or whatever might feel like it is. I've kind of lost track of how big a backlash there was.
Well, that's a good point. You don't know because you only know through your Twitter feed and through the news. But yes, I think like if you ignore Twitter, which is hard to do, but I would admire anybody who did, and you're able to get through the day without it, I think the news that you get from newspapers and maybe the evening news, which sounds, makes me sound 84 years old, but I'm just saying it in an experimental, hypothetical way, I think you would have found that people were really taken aback by what Sanders said.
Last thing on the 4-star general thing. In Vietnam, you'll recall that 4-star generals were lying.
Vietnam was so long ago.
It was, and it's a shame.
You say you'll recall as if it happened,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, can we go to, maybe the
history books,
the Grenada invasion?
History books will bear out the fact that 4-star generals were lying about casualties, both our casualties, the U.S. kids who were over there fighting, and also the casualties on the other side.
That's what I'm saying. They're human beings, right? I mean, we look at John Kelly and we think, oh, my God, he's got 4 stars. He's going to be a straight shooter. He's also the president's chief of staff. He's going to spin things in a way that make the president look as good as he can because that's what he's paid to do. Whether he's going to be in that job in 2 weeks, we don't know because people don't stay in that job. But that's his job, and just because he's a general doesn't mean he's not going to lie. Look at Stanley McChrystal, the same thing. I mean, they like anybody, they frame things in the way that they want to frame it, and the higher up they get, with the more publicity they get, that's what happens.
Well, we didn't cover as much stuff as I wanted to, Michael.
Yeah, I know. This fastest 15 thing that my agent worked out with your people is just 15 may not be enough.
The Turks, I was over at the Young Turks, is someplace you can see a lot of Michael Shure if you want to. He's just awesome. I was on the Turks, and we're talking about the podcast, this podcast that you're listening to right now, everybody. And I said, well, Michael Shure is on the podcast, and we usually do him right at the beginning because give people a little blast of what's going on, politics from Michael, and sometimes we talk about some other stuff. And then if people aren't into politics or whatever, they can move past it and they can get into the other stuff. And it was suggested, well, you should put Michael at the end, really. Put the politics at the end. And so I said, well, maybe we'll try that. I like you at the beginning, though. I think it's...
Thank you. What was the idea of at the end, right? So, like, once you get...
well, I was saying I could...
it's like teasing the interesting, fun story at the end of the newscast.
That was it. Yeah.
Okay.
That was it. It was all about the tease.
Right.
It was in the context of you can never tell with these podcasts whether people have had so much of the analysis of whatever that they're going, oh, great. Is there more of this? So that's why I put us at the beginning, because if you've had enough of analysis or whatever, I think that we offer some interesting insights on this program, and we do it in a quick way at the beginning. But you can move past it, and if it's not your vibe, then go 18 minutes into the show, and you can catch an interview.
It's kind of like this is the monologue, and then we get to the guests, right?
There you go. So I think it makes sense. The other thing, from a purely functional standpoint, I think if you put this conversation at the end of our podcast, you don't really know how far ahead to skip to find it.
Oh, that's true, too. You don't know how long the guest goes.
Yeah,
or
so
the other story.
I'd have to note that in my notes, and then they would have to be transferred to
Yeah.
For now, I think we're going to leave you right where you are.
Sounds okay with
Unless there's a tremendous reaction from everyone.
If there's a lot of backlash, I'll know. Yeah.
You can reach Michael Shure at...
Michael Shure.
Michael Shure. And Shure is spelled Shure. You can reach him on Twitter. You've already heard how he just can't put Twitter down. So,
by the way, check out i24news.tv, the letter i24news.tv. That's where you can find me. And it's good. I mean, it's a real news network operating from the Middle East and telling the stories with absolutely zero bias.
I love that. I am going to check that out.
All right.
Michael Shure, everybody. Come on.
Oh, thank you so much. It is always good to be here.
If you like The Edge, help us out by liking us on Facebook. Subscribe to The Edge with Mark Thompson on iTunes or on Stitcher.
Edge-show.com.
Edge-show.com.
Say your name for me.
It's Kartick Satanayaran.
I think I'll be able to say that.
I know it's not the easiest name to pronounce.
Kartick Satanayaran. Something like that?
Wow, that's incredible. Were you Indian in your last birth? I must thank you, Mark, for being so kind as to host our event, and I cannot wait to thank you personally when I see you on 4th of November.
Well, thank you for that, thanks. But I also would say that it's an odd position that I'm in because I actually didn't really know of your organization before I was approached. And so then I researched the organization, and I'm so blown away and impressed that it is my honor to be part of things and to help with the proceedings in any way I can. So it's quite extraordinary that I went from knowing nothing to being proud of being part of things. Wildlife SOS, you guys are credited with ending this dancing bear industry in India. What is the dancing bear industry? That was a big industry?
Yes, indeed. There were over 1,200 bears that were used for performances across the country, and it was by this community, a nomadic gypsy community called the Kalandars. And basically, bear cubs were being removed out of the forests. The mothers were killed, and the body parts were harvested. And these baby bears would then be tortured quite brutally. Their teeth would be broken with metal rods, and a red-hot iron poker would be thrust through their delicate muzzle, and then that wound would be left untreated so that it would give them a great deal of pain and discomfort, and a thick, coarse rope threaded through that, and then and at that end of that rope would live that bear for the rest of its little life. And this rope would be about all of 4 feet, and the bear would be dragged around at the end of that rope on streets, through villages, through towns. And, when the rope would be pulled up, the bear, because of the pain through the muzzle, the searing pain that would go through it, it would force the bear to stand up on its 2 hind feet and hop up and down in pain. And that was seen and interpreted as dancing. And thus the term dancing bears kind of came into existence. And this was happening for about 400 years in India. And Wildlife SOS came to know about this. And basically me and my co-founder Geeta started investigating this in 1995. And we did a 30-month investigation initially, produced a report, gave it to the government, and we were told that this is an extremely controversial subject. It involves, minority communities, livelihoods, and how are we going to go about resolving the matter, because it was a complex matter, and there were about 3,000 families that depended on these bears for their livelihood.
So the government of India was not sympathetic to the cruelty associated with this and even the illegality associated. I assume it was illegal, wasn't it?
It was illegal. The government of India was sympathetic, but I think they were just, a little bit hesitant to engage with this community because it involved, a lot of livelihoods. And it was indeed a controversial subject. And if they used and applied the law that was prescribed, technically speaking, every single person who was holding a bear could have been convicted to a 7-year jail sentence. That meant that 3,000 families would be without their primary income earners, and that would, of course, certainly lead to a lot of chaos. So I guess that was the complex issue. So what we did was something out of the box, and we approached the communities and asked them if they had a dream and if they would like to consider doing something else instead of eking out a livelihood, using these bears. And, we did a needs assessment, and when Geeta and I had studied this in depth, and we traveled with the communities, we lived in their villages, studied them in depth, and even posed as decoy traders and buyers to understand where these bear cubs came from, how the poaching happened, where they were being transported, and how many of them died during the transportation and all of that. We produced a report, convinced the government to give us some support, so they initially gave us some land, and we got the encouragement and their support to move forward in the cooperation. And we then, raised private donations to set up a bear rehabilitation center. We worked with the communities and the women in the communities, created alternative skill development and training. And once we felt that they were in a position where they were not going to be any longer dependent on this, we then hot swapped that with an opportunity for them to give up something that was illegal and switch over to something that was legal, something that they could hold their heads up high with and live with dignity, and a more sustainable form of revenue. And we combined that with free education for the children, school books, uniforms, and a lot of women empowerment projects. We did not think it would work at all. Initially, we were extremely skeptical. This was a difficult community. There were gypsies, and they'd been defensive for a very long time, but it worked. And, once it changed, one man came forward and he said, well, I'm willing to give this a shot if you can help me. So we set up a bank account for him. We gave him a loan, helped him with a $2,000 seed fund to buy a tuk-tuk or an auto rickshaw, like a local taxi, really, a three-wheeler taxi. And that would earn him about 4 times more than what the bear was going to earn him on a daily basis. We combined that with, support for his family, support for the education of his children, and it seemed like a great deal. So the guy jumped, and he shook hands with us, took over the deal, and then after that, there was no turning back. We didn't know where to find the money from, to be honest, but good people just came out of the woodwork and said, I heard you're trying to solve this problem. I've seen this for decades, and I've always vowed I'll never go back to India because of this horrible practice. And, people came out of the woodwork to support us, and we eventually, at the end of 17 long years, we had removed 628 bears from the streets, and we had rehabilitated 3,000 families, and to this day we send over 1,600 children to school, and we brought an end to the entire practice of dancing bears across the country. It was a roaring victory. We didn't think we'd achieve it in less than 50 years, but we did.
It's remarkable. That is an unreal story. And the thing about that story that makes it so significant, I think, just on an ongoing basis in the universe of trying to reverse wrongs, is that you addressed the economic need of these people. It wasn't just, hey, you've got to stop this because this is a barbaric thing that you're doing. And then leaving it at that. You thought that you had to come up with a replacement. You had to at least try to find something for these communities to wrap themselves around that would be economically sustainable so that they could let go of it. You gave them a reason to let go of this barbarism.
Absolutely. We studied their need, and we found that they were kind of trapped in this themselves. They didn't know any better, and it was like a vicious cycle, and they were chasing their own tails. And they continued to be in the illegal side of what they were doing. And we said, well, why don't you have dreams? And we realized they all wanted electricity, they wanted water, they had no health care. The women would have to walk 5 kilometers to get a big pot of water to cook for the day and to drink. And we realized that, this was not going to improve, and their lives were not going to improve unless we gave them a better deal. So we said, well, let's try and make it a leap of faith for both themselves and the bears. And in order to protect the bears from being removed from the forest, from being poached, from being brutalized, and from being exploited in this manner, the only sustainable solution was to make sure that the people did not need to go back to being exploiters of these bears. And so we gave them that one solution, and we held their hands and walked them through this path. Of course, we got severe criticism for it. A lot of people said, oh, well, these are criminals, send them to jail. Why are you trying to reward these people? But we realized that the only way we could ensure that this practice would not rear its ugly head again was by ensuring that these people did not need to do this any longer. And education is an extremely powerful tool. Once children are injected with education, they don't want to get out on the street and beg with bears and, be involved in something that's illegal. They want to be able to hold their heads up high. And today, I think it's a great victory for Wildlife SOS that some of those children that we've been educating now for, over a decade, some of them are now ready to become engineers and doctors. And of course, owe their future to us. But more than anything else, the bears are safe, and the community will never, ever go back to doing this again. That is, I think, a remarkable success story that we are really proud to be associated with. It gives us a lot of confidence that no problem is unsolvable. Everything is possible to solve if you're persistent, you're determined, and you decide that you will not rest until this is solved.
It also represents such a creative and thoughtful approach. And I think that's what may set you apart in this world of trying to right the wrongs that are inflicted on the animal community and on the community around us, conservation generally. When I look at overfishing that's happening in such a big way around the world, these impoverished communities in Asia, they pull all these fish out of the ocean slowly. There are no more overfish. I was just over in Cambodia, and these communities are now in a free fall because there are all these fishing boats out there, and there are no more fish coming out of the water. I mean, not literally none, but effectively none. And as a result, now their economic situation is even worse, right? And so the communities that have intervened in the overfishing and have found creative ways of introducing some sort of economically sustainable life for them have done well. And so it is with this. I mean, you wouldn't have thought, though, that in this dancing bear, bizarre world of cruelty and horror, that you could, with the seeds of just wanting to stop that thing, as you say, have created a whole community of growth and education and economic vibrance. It's amazing.
That was the only way to resolve this. So we went ahead with it, and it was kind of a bit of a leap. I think sometimes you have to just take those chances. Nobody was willing to support us. Why are you trying to help these people? And that was the constant thing we were told, but we had to do it. So we left, and a net appeared, thankfully, and we were able to resolve this. To this day, I do not know how we raised those colossal sums of money that resolved this problem, because, every family had to be resettled. Every bear had to be surrendered through a process. We established 4 different rehabilitation centers across India to receive these 628 bears. And we've done hundreds of root canal surgeries to fix those abscesses and huge tumors that they had in their teeth because of the way they'd been broken, and the scars of those bears, etc. So, but it gave us a lot of confidence that we could solve other problems, which is when we took on the elephant issues in India as well.
Thank you, because I was going to mention Wildlife SOS applied essentially that same plan to what was going on with elephants. Now, give us a snapshot of what's going on. Elephants are so abused in India and all over the world. I mean, and every time I see somebody with a picture of themselves on an elephant, I'm thinking, wow, if you only knew how they destroy that elephant. I mean, physically, it is horrifying to see the spikes and the intense tools of pain that are these animals are beaten. They are beaten almost literally to death to bring them into submission, so they'll take that picture with tourists, and so that they'll do other things. What was the situation with the elephant community? How did you get involved? But you did apply, I think, that same strategy that you used with the dancing bears to the elephants.
Absolutely. Mark, that's exactly what we did. The confidence we had in resolving the bear issue, I think, gave us the strength and the moxie to take on a huge problem like the elephants. I mean, it is honestly a gigantic task that we've taken on, but we're determined to do everything we can to change the way people perceive elephants in India. India is the last stronghold for the Asian elephant. We have nearly 25 to 27,000 elephants left in the wild. That's all there is left, and that's 50%. So, if you lose that, that's it. And, the other areas like Myanmar, Cambodia, and Thailand, etc., Sri Lanka, etc., already losing their elephants to so many things, including human-elephant conflict, fragmentation of their habitats, and of course, lots of collateral damage, that is caused by these issues. The big problem that we have in India is the fascination for elephants in captivity. We have nearly 3,500 elephants in captivity in India, and that is not reducing, shockingly, because there is a constant demand for young elephants that are being gifted to temples and being sold to circuses, being gifted to, high-profile families, all because it's a prestige symbol or somebody wants to make an offering to the gods. So it's almost ironic that on one hand, Indians believe hugely in the elephant god, which is Ganesha. He's the god of good beginnings. There is not an exam or a new house built or a visa application that's submitted without praying to Lord Ganesha. On the other hand, the same embodiment of that Lord Ganesha, the real elephant, is poached from the forest, calves are torn away from their families, and then, as you said yourself, described, they are beaten mercilessly until they give up the ghost, and they just are completely beaten into submission. So they will be a captive elephant, they will be domesticated enough, they will be frightened and terrified enough to let someone ride on their backs, or stand in a temple, or perform in a circus, or beg on the streets, and or give tourists rides. This is exactly what the ugly truth is, and most people do not know this. And it's really important that every anybody's dream to ride an elephant, but it's that elephant's worst nightmare to be ridden, because it lives an entire lifetime of captivity, brutality, in chains on concrete, with spikes embedded in its feet, and spiked bullhooks being shoved through its jaws and its head and its skull and its ears, all through its life, just so somebody can have a photo taken with an elephant or have a ride on an elephant.
Yeah, and as you say, I think people who want their picture taken with an elephant, I think those who want to touch an elephant and those who want to ride an elephant have no conception of what we've just been talking about here. They have no conception that the only way to have broken the spirit of the most powerful animal in the jungle was to beat it to the point of being close to death. And then, as you say, if you look at the elephant, you can see sort of the open sores and wounds from these spikes you're talking about. So I think most tourists have no conception of that.
You're absolutely right. And they think that, that the elephants are bonded very closely with their mahouts or their keepers. And unfortunately, I think the tourism industry sells it that way to them so that people will go and book these elephant rides, etc., and get on those elephant backs. And very often, sores and wounds are very carefully camouflaged, or they're even sometimes covered and draped over with nice, colorful robes, so people don't see those things, and they, unfortunately, become victims of ignorance. So this is one of our single important missions, which is to let people know what happens to these elephants that they see in temples and on tourist rides. And, if they really want to see an elephant up close, we encourage them to come to the Elephant Conservation and Care Center that Wildlife SOS runs, where we use a protected contact mechanism and something called positive reinforcement, where the same elephants that have been abused, that were in distress, and we've been able to rescue them, are now living a life of dignity and freedom, and they get a chance to actually do what they want. And we've been able to reassure them and restore that faith in mankind to an extent where they actually will let you come and give them a bath, and you can partake in activities that people want to do in caring for that elephant, picking up the dung, helping clean the elephant, etc., feeding it, where you get the opportunity to understand what these elephants have gone through and how you can ensure that you take that message out and become an elephant ambassador to save the species.
The overall elephant effort, it's not only tourism, of course, it's poaching, and the tusks of the elephant have for hundreds and maybe even longer. I don't know how long has that ivory associated with elephants been used as an artifact and been used in ornamental ways? I've got to think it's as far back as we can remember.
Oh yes, it's been an ongoing process for centuries, but unfortunately, what's happened is, when there is human need, I think nature always provides. But when it turns to greed, that is when it becomes a real problem, and it's not sustainable any longer. So now you have, all these organized poaching syndicates, which basically want to harvest every possible piece of ivory they can get, and tail hair from the elephant and any other body parts that they can harvest and use and exploit commercially. That is leading to this huge poaching crisis.
So you have not only the problem with the tourism industry that we're talking about, where mahouts or these trainers beat these animals into submission to the point that they've got to perform these tricks. You also have them used in religious ceremonies, as you say. You have them standing for days and days and months and years, and we'll get to the case of one of those elephants in a second, next to a temple or next to somebody's a rich person's private home. On top of all of that, you have this poaching crisis, and now you have these militias, well-funded, going after all of these elephants. They want to hunt down every last elephant on Earth for the body parts, as you say. I guess the ivory top among them.
Yes, absolutely. And the very shocking part of that is the harvesting of these young calves, which are being separated from the herd. The entire herd is driven away by using fireworks and other things to stampede them. And then the little calves who are straggling behind are then trapped and separated from the herds, and then taken away, and then taken to remote areas in the forest where they're beaten mercilessly till they become captive or basically submit to their captors. And it's nothing short of slavery, in my opinion, that, these elephants suffer for the rest of their lives after that. And that, I think, we have to put an end to. That can only happen if people stop riding elephants, people stop looking at elephants in temples, and people start asking questions. Why is this elephant here? Why is it not in the forest? And if they, stop that and support organizations like Wildlife SOS, trying to make this a public issue and an important question, I think we can really expedite a solution, and we can stop these elephants from being poached from the forest and keep them in the wild where they deserve to be.
Wildlife SOS is not some big, well-funded organization. So you hear these amazing things that are being done, funding the education of these communities to stop the dancing bear tradition, getting involved in this elephant problem, which is, as we were just saying, so big. And somehow you come together with just the right amount of money. I mean, you really are sort of scrapping with very little in the way of funding to make ends meet and to still address all of these issues in a very creative way. How do you get money for this organization?
To be honest with you, you're absolutely right. We are not flush with funds at all, and we have to quite literally scrape every little dollar that we can to try and, make a difference to these elephants. And it's almost a daily struggle. But, we have a firm belief that there are people out there who care, and there are people out there who care enough, who will go the extra mile, dig deep into their pockets and help. And because they cannot come physically and assist us and be involved with their time and donate their time, very often some people, have to compromise by donating money instead of time. And we also accept a lot of donations in kind. People donate services to us, legal support, stationery, vehicles, medical equipment, and things like that. Sometimes they give us connections that help make a huge difference. So every little bit helps, and we do not say no to anything. We are grateful for every cent, every penny, every rupee, every dollar goes a long way, and that is what makes a difference to what we are trying to achieve out there. So yes, fundraising is unfortunately a big challenge, and to be honest, I really hate money because it is kind of the source of all evils in this world. But unfortunately, if you want to save elephants, and it is a gigantic task, and our requirement is really large, just as big as the jumbos themselves are. Each elephant eats between 300 to 400 kilograms per day. And, the amount of water we require, the food we require, the medicines we require, the staff that we need in order to care for these elephants, the veterinarians that are on our rolls, etc., ends up costing money. And for that purpose alone, we are forced to raise support. And that's what, this event, Dusk After Dusk, is all about as well.
There's a fundraiser here in Los Angeles that will hopefully raise some money for this great organization to continue their work. It's called Tusk After Dusk. It's a benefit for Wildlife SOS. It's going to be at the Avalon in Hollywood. It's Saturday, November 4th. So those who are listening, and it's still before the date, Saturday, November 4th, please get your tickets. And if you're listening after the fact, if it's already past November 4th and you're listening and you're going, gosh, I missed Tusk After Dusk, but I'd like to help, then help them out. We'll have a click-through on our website, edge-show.com. But Wildlife SOS would love any donation you can make. And the work is unbelievable. And I'm not done. I mean, believe me, there's more than even this. This would be remarkable in itself. But you're fighting all of these ongoing poaching operations against elephants. And there are also other threatened animals. We mentioned elephants, but leopards and tigers and all of these majestic creatures that at one time really were sort of the rulers of the jungle and peppered these landscapes. They're all endangered. And so your job, it seems, and the associated task of Wildlife SOS, it seems to grow bigger every day.
Yes, absolutely. We work with everything from crocodiles to elephants, bears, leopards, tigers, pangolins, porcupines, and we also work with a lot of indigenous communities, and we're trying to change them from being poachers to becoming protectors of their landscape and the wildlife around them. And in fact, I will be speaking about this on November 4th, where I'll be giving a talk about the work of Wildlife SOS and how we are saving India's elephants, bears, leopards, etc. On that evening. And I look forward to meeting everybody who really cares about elephants and wild animals. I think we can all make a huge difference. I'd love for everyone to come there, and if they can please, if they haven't already bought tickets, they could at duskafterdusk.com. And we have 3 honorees that evening. One is Dr. Jenny Conrad, who will receive the Champs Award for her incredible work as an advocate for animals and for starting the Paw Project, who's addressed suffering of cats that undergo declawing. And we also have Nolan Gould, who is an actor from the hit TV series Modern Family. As a young person, he's been showing incredible leadership and interest in protecting wildlife. We are really honored that he'd be accepting the Gajraj Award, meaning King of Elephants. And Patty Shankar, who is being honored by us for her lifetime achievement of helping all animals, and her interest in helping wildlife, farm animals, and companion animals is really quite a huge inspiration, and she will receive the Akila Award from Wildlife SOS. And the evening will have vegan food, live entertainment, 3 great performers are scheduled for the evening, and an auction as well.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a night. So if you can make it, and it's before November 4th when you hear this, I hope that you'll join us in Los Angeles at the Avalon for this. Yeah, you'll learn so much, but it's also just a fun night and a really, really special night. There was this elephant Raju. Got a lot of publicity. I know it was all over television, radio, and papers worldwide. Tell us about Raju and how you guys got involved. There was a legal case to free this elephant.
When we heard about Raju, we were really shocked. He'd been already in those spike chains for about 52 years already, and it was really something that we did not want to let go on any longer. And, when we started pursuing that case...
Stop right there. When you say he was in those spike chains for 52 years, what was he doing? What was he being asked to do? A lot of elephants are literally just standing places for literally 50 years. I mean, if they're temple elephants or all the rest, some of them that you've mentioned. But what was Raju being asked to do every day? What was his routine?
He had different routines, from wedding receptions to begging on the street to standing outside a temple. And in between, he would also get rented out to circuses, local circuses. So basically, he was an elephant that would get abused in every way possible. And I think he spent more time at temples and begging on the streets than anything else. So basically, this was his routine. Every single day, trudge on the street, stand outside a temple, beg, bless people supposedly, because the mahout who was sitting with him, or his keeper, would prod him with a spear, and that would make him lift his trunk. And of course, the people around, or the devotees of the temple, would think he's blessing them. Little do they know what treatment he had received in order for him to be behaving like he blessed them.
How did you become aware of Raju to begin with?
So we'd seen some footage from our informers. We employ about 24 informers who actually gather intelligence on various wildlife crimes and feed that back to us. So we are constantly monitoring what's going on out there. And, we'd been tracking him for a while, and we had, set out a small team to investigate if his documentation was legal and if, he was legally being held, etc. And then once we got the confirmation that it was completely illegal and there was no documentation whatsoever, and that the Forest Department and the police had both confirmed, complete support to help us move forward, that's when we started working, even more on Raju's case. And, when we realized the facts of the matter, that, he'd been in chains and in those spiked anklets for over 50 years, and he'd been sold over 27 times, between people, all illegally, of course. And technically it was trafficking and nothing short of that. That's when we decided to descend down on this case. And when we went in, the evening that we went in and we decided to rescue him, I'd been there since the morning. I was sitting in a park and tracking him. I was a decoy that day. And so I was reading a newspaper in the park with a hole cut in the newspaper and actually observing this elephant. I was pretending to be an innocent, person walking in the park, sitting down on a bench and reading a newspaper. That's how I looked. But we had teams around the park gathering data and coordinating with the police and getting, the truck set up and stuff like that. So about 6 p.m. that evening, the police said, okay, let's go in and take the elephant. We had them all on board. And we had a big team of police and enforcement officers, forest department staff, etc. And people who were holding him in illegal custody said, give us 20 minutes and we'll give the elephant over to you. And we thought, okay, that might be a better way to do it because it'll be without confrontation. And the police said, yeah, let's give him 20 minutes. What do we have to lose? We said, fine. But 20 minutes later, those people came with a very sinister smile on their face and a smirk saying, well, now let's see you take that elephant. We bet you cannot. And we're going to go and get reinforcement to prevent you from taking this elephant from here. And that, frightened the hell out of me, because I was just imagining that, they've really done more damage to him. And so I requested the police to take those people into custody, and basically we had them taken into custody right away so they wouldn't call more reinforcements to block us. And then what we saw shocked the hell out of me and our entire team, because what they'd done was they'd chained him up with spiked anklets on all 4 feet. They'd hobbled him up completely and beaten him and speared him. So he was basically a seething, angry, revolting elephant, because he was mad. They'd just beaten him, and he was in a complete mess. And he wouldn't let anybody approach him because he was really mad. And they, were hoping that he would not let us approach close enough so we couldn't untie him and take him away from there. That would buy them enough time to get reinforcements to block us. This often happens in such situations. We were dealing with, law enforcement and illegal custody of wild animals. So then from 6:30 p.m. onwards, we just sat there, and he was so angry and mad that he was picking up big branches weighing 50, 60 kilograms and chucking them like missiles all around us. And, some of our staff even got injured in that process. So we had to clear away all the debris around him so he could pick things up and throw it at us. And then we just sat there beside him, just out of his trunk's reach, and just spoke with him and tried to offer him water and calm him down. It took us from 6:30 p.m. that evening to 3 a.m. the next morning to calm him down. And then finally, he was just so exhausted that he kind of sat down and allowed us to loosen some of the chains off his feet. But they had wound it up so tight and used binding wire to seal the chains up. It was almost impossible to take it off. So it took us hours to kind of loosen these chains and take it off. And that's when I saw tears coming down his eyes. And I asked my veterinarian, can elephants cry really? And he said to me, yeah, they're sentient human, beings, and they feel emotions just like human beings. It's almost, I think, brutal that we do this to our elephants, but, they can feel everything just the way we feel it, like human beings. So I took that photo, and then I posted it online, and that photo and that video went viral. I think we had over 200,000 views of that, and we did receive a lot of support from all over the world.
That was you're saying the photo and the video of the elephant being freed but crying from all the pain of those spiked shackles that were tearing into his flesh.
Absolutely, that's exactly what happened. And then between 3:30 and 4:30 we had 1 hour, because after that it would get light, and then that meant that our window was, fast disappearing, and then we could have reinforcements of mean people and bad people who would stop us from getting out of that place with the elephant. So we then kind of spoke with him, and then that's when I saw that he actually recognized the fact that we were going to help him, and he stopped resisting, and he allowed us to actually walk him nearly about 400 meters out to the truck where the truck was waiting. And he let us walk him onto the truck. And I was really gobsmacked to see this huge elephant let us do that. Complete strangers coming up to him and taking him away. And it's like he knew that this was his ticket out of this hellhole. And he just allowed us to lead him out to the truck. And once we had him in the truck, we just kind of batted out of there, and we had police escorts all the way till we were out of that district. So before the crack of dawn, we were out of that location and well on our way to the Elephant Conservation and Care Center that Wildlife SOS has established in Mathura, which is just about 2 hours from Delhi. And eventually when we got him there, he got off the truck, and all he does now today is live a retired life. And we give him as much dignity and freedom as we can, and give him every possible kind of happiness that he deserves. But he's really been abused so much that I think his body is beginning to show the severe wear and tear that it's suffered and taken all this all these years.
I've seen the videos of him in whirlpools and in enjoying this time in water. I guess when he's in water, the weight of his body is not on those limbs that have been so badly abused through the years. He does seem as though, and I saw him sort of slowly being socialized, because that's tricky too, right? These are animals that they're highly social, and as you say, highly sentient, emotional creatures, and yet they've been beaten mercilessly all their lives, isolated from other creatures. And so how do they, at your wildlife refuge, Wildlife SOS, how do you help them interact? And do they always interact? How does it all work?
Well, when they come to our facility, we've got to spend a lot of time understanding their individual personalities. And, we've got to understand their behavior, their personality, their likes, their dislikes, and, the compatibility possibility with other elephants. So, Raju was, initially we thought he might actually, get along with other elephants, but we found he was so weak that although he was very large, he could easily get pushed over by another elephant, even if it was being done playfully. And then he might break a rib or a leg or something. So we had to give him time to kind of recover, put on some weight, regain some of his health. He had some major chronic issues. And we create mechanisms by which they can interact with other elephants across a safe barrier, so the other elephant or themselves cannot, cause an injury to each other, while it allows us an opportunity to study the compatibility and their ability to interact with each other in a safe manner. So in a controlled environment is how we do it. And then eventually, as we start taking them out for walks and get them to interact with other elephants and things like that, then, we get an idea of, okay, who they make friends with, who they like. Raju's quite popular with all the ladies. The girl elephants really love him. The cows love to walk up to him. And some of the young ones really do everything they can to flirt with him. And he enjoys all that quite coyly. Attention.
Your facility, Wildlife SOS, where is it? In relation to, I, like all Americans, am weak on geography, but give me some sense of where it is.
So, India's capital is New Delhi, and that's where you fly into, typically. And New Delhi is barely 2 hours away from the Elephant Conservation and Care Center, which is also only about 45 minutes from the Taj Mahal. I presume everybody knows where the Taj Mahal is. It's one of the 7 wonders of the world, even Americans.
Yes, we know the Taj, yeah. So that's actually a pretty good place for you, because you're kind of, in a way, centrally located then.
Yes, we are centrally located, and we think that it gives us the opportunity to educate every single person we can. So our goal is to create a conservation education model platform and also strengthen and position the Elephant Conservation and Care Center as a model facility where elephants can receive a high degree of veterinary care, high degree of kindness and compassion, and a modern and a humane scientific approach of management. So, we don't need to beat the elephants, we don't need to lash them, we don't need to brutalize them, but we can manage them with just kindness, positive reinforcement, and a scientific methodology. And that's what we want to show everyone. So the facility also works as a training center, and we invite elephant managers from around India to come and attend workshops over there where we train them in how to manage the elephants without having to be brutal, cruel, and horrible to those elephants, and how they can create relationships which are meaningful and enjoyable both for the elephant and for themselves. It also increases safety of the human beings who work with the elephants.
Yeah, there's a lot to know, and our knowledge of elephants is pretty much zero, because all we get is the picture with the elephant when we're a tourist wherever. So I've learned more about the elephants in the last, I would say, 10 years, and I'm afraid that all the information as to sort of how they're treated is grim, but you've gotten a snapshot of it here if you've listened, and that's enough for you to know it's time to act. And so I'd encourage our listeners, if you should go at least look around your website, wildlifesos.org.
That's correct. It is wildlifesos.org. And also our Facebook is Wildlife SOS India. And people who would like to come to the Tusk After Dusk event, they can get tickets on tuskafterdusk.com. And please, you do everything you can to spread the word. Let's try and save these elephants. We are only as strong as you can make us. We can only do as much as the support we receive. And, we've got absolute responsibility and a duty towards these animals, who inherited this planet much before us. And we are edging them out, we're pushing them out. Imagine there's billions of human beings on this planet, and we have merely 25,000 elephants left in the whole country of India. And, at this rate, it's a shame if human beings can do this to the biggest land mammal of this planet after being here for millions of years. So I think we all need to come together and try and make a difference to these species.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be too down on people, but when you think about it just in those terms, that we've been here for such a short time, and yet we're destroying all of these things that have been here for such a long time, it's hard to be a fan of humanity given all the destruction that humanity has wrought. But, and this is why I love talking to people like Kartick, but because of Kartick and his organization Wildlife SOS, I start to think, but they're pieces of humanity that are capable of making such a difference and doing so many good things. And I don't mean to be too heavy, but I think I can get pretty bleak about things generally when I look at what humanity's doing. But then I have a conversation like this and I go, wow, there really is a chance, and there are people who have creative, strategic ways to make a difference. So I encourage everyone to go to wildlifesos.org, to go to Wildlife SOS India on Facebook, and to attend Tusk After Dusk in Los Angeles on November 4th. I'll be there. And I would love to. You can ride me if you want to jump on my back. I will take a picture with you. TuskAfterDusk.com. Don't ever take a picture with an elephant where you see a mahout there. Those mahouts. God, that was one of the biggest, because when you talked at last thing, when you hear the mahouts talk and they're asked about, would you be cruel to, and they go, oh, no. Are you kidding? My livelihood is the elephant. I don't want anything bad to happen to the elephant. They're so convincing when they talk. I love this elephant like my own child. You hear them talk that way. They talk that talk, but then they beat that elephant with those spikes and with that spear. They beat that elephant senseless. And so the lies that are told, the bald-faced lies that are told, make you, again, lose faith in everyone who has contact with elephants there in India and around the world.
Absolutely, Mark. You're absolutely right. I love the fact that you said, ride me, but don't ride elephants. Thank you for that very, very kind and really heart-rending appeal to people. I think, it's people like you who can help us, get this message out there. I really, I'm grateful to you personally and from all of us at Wildlife SOS for feeling so deeply for the elephants. Thank you for joining our herd. Really appreciate it.
It's a great pleasure and an honor. Thank you again, Kartick Satanayaran. It's said often in conversation that it's an honor to speak to someone, but it really is an honor to have spoken to you today. Thank you.
Likewise, Mark. Thank you. It's a delight to speak with you and to have someone who's as passionate as you. I mean, what you say comes across so strongly in your words, and I can see that you walk the talk. So I look forward to meeting you and thanking you personally on the 4th of November.
There's a link to Wildlife SOS at our website, edge-show.com, and maybe if you're in the LA area and you're hearing this before November 4th, I'll see you at the Wildlife SOS Gala event, and we can have pictures taken, and we can talk, and we can have a drink together. It'll be great. So until then, or until next time, bye.
If you enjoy listening to The Edge, support them by subscribing to The Edge on iTunes, Stitcher, and you can listen through the iHeartRadio app. Get busy listening.